afternoon and thanks for joining us. I'm Judy Simpson. As always, on the fourth Wednesday of the month, I'm joined by Mark LaBarr, conservation biologist for Audubon, Vermont. Great to see you again.
Always great to be here.
So today it looks like we're going to go back with you to the Bahamas. Lucky us.
Yes, well, I was fortunate again this year to go back to the Bahamas as part of Audubon's international program. They've been doing work down in the Bahamas focusing on shorebirds, primarily piping plovers, for the past 5 years. And so we got the opportunity to revisit the place that I went last year, only in a little bit of a different fashion.
So maybe you can explain exactly where in the Bahamas you were.
Sure. So the Bahamas are, a group of multiple islands, a couple hundred islands off the basically to the east of Florida and north of Cuba. The island that I was focusing on is that big one there that you can see. That's Andros Island. And last year I spent most of my time on the northern section of the island. That's become really important because that very north tip about 5-6 years ago, it's a place called the Jolter Keys. And they found that what happens out there is as the tide cycle goes back and forth, it opens up these massive flats, which attracts shorebirds from all over, including a large number of piping plover. These birds come out, they use these flats to feed. There's a lot of shrimps and everything like that that are on the flats as well. And so it became a really important place. Probably they're estimating between the Jolter Keys and another key called the Berry Island, there's maybe 20% of the wintering population of the piping plover, which is a federally endangered species. So there's been a lot of focus there. My task, though, was to get to South Andros. And that was to get down to the bottom, and this is the bottom end of Andros, and all those little points and dots and lines are the path that I took with a volunteer, Tammy Pearl, who helped me out. Our goal was this kind of southwestern section called the Water Keys. We tried to get there last year. I don't know if you remember, I was on a boat and the boat broke down and we couldn't make it all the way down. So that was really our goal, and to resurvey a bunch of spots down in South Andros.
How much time did you have?
We had about a week, and so our work was spent basically trying to get to places when low tide occurred, to survey, along the shorelines. We would find these open flats that would open up, not quite like the Jolters. You can see there's a lot of vegetation here, but we did find some birds using binoculars and scopes. That was me on one of the flats down towards the southern portion, and this is Tammy on one of the beach areas on the northern portion of South Andros. So we spent a lot of time driving back and forth up and down the island, trying to get to these locations where birds had been seen in the past.
You weren't always on foot, though, right?
We weren't. We did a lot of walking when we were on the beaches and such, but we also had to try to get out to the Water Keys. And so we basically hired a boat captain. This is Bernd Ferguson, who's a bone fishing guide, and there's Tammy, and he took us down, or tried to take us down. We were hoping to find the same kind of substrate that was up at the Jolter Keys. We were hoping to find down in the southern portion. This is one of the small islands that we found. We did find piping plovers on. Unfortunately, we were kind of thwarted again as the winds out of the northeast. Normally there's a wind, or not the northeast, but the northwest. Normally the winds come from the east, and there was a northeaster happening here when I was down there, so it was nice to be there. There was a lot of snow falling, but it caused all of these flats to remain underwater, so they never really got exposed. So I guess it just means we'll have to try to go back again. This is actually,
what a shame.
This is actually, I think, the third or fourth time that folks have tried to get down to the Water Keys to experience that, and it's just difficult with weather and having to have the boats and the availability. So
what did you find when you were down there?
Well, of course, we were looking for piping plovers. Those were the big ones, and we did find about 66 plovers. We saw a little bit more than 80, but some of those we double counted. And this plover, you can see, actually has bands on it as well. So one of the things that we were doing when we were down there was we were looking for these banded individuals. And we did end up, of those 66, we did end up finding 3. two of which were had been banded up at the Isle of Magdalene, which is up north of Prince Edward Island. So it was one of those things where it was really kind of cool to see these birds that had been banded up there using at least parts of South Andros. So that was really good. We found these, plovers in little pockets. Even on our last night, we were walking down the beach. We were invited to dinner by a local family that lives down there. And Tammy happened to, came across this bunch of shorebirds, and Tammy went back and got her flashlight. She does shorebird work, piping plover work on Assateague Island for the National Park Service. And sure enough, there at night, our final two plovers we caught, she found with the flashlight.
Is that pretty much how they are populated in the area, just various clumps, not huge flocks?
Well, the thing about the jolters is they do come out. The shorebirds come out in these massive flocks. We were hoping to find the same thing, or at least figure out if that did occur down there. As far as the plovers, we did find them in these just little groups. So one group of 8, another group of 22. That island that I showed you I think we had 13 on that island. So some of the other birds you would find in larger numbers, like the short-billed dowitcher. So this was a bird that we saw down around Pleasant Bay, and this was one that we saw probably a couple hundred of these birds mixed in with other birds like ruddy turnstones. So we didn't see great diversity. Here's a ruddy turnstone, but we did see large number of these birds on some of these flats as they got exposed. We were also fortunate to see reddish egrets. This is a bird that is just like our great egret or great blue heron, has that same kind of shape. But it has different color phases. Now, what was interesting is last year when we were in the boat, we came across a lot of mud. We didn't find many plovers, and it seemed like we were finding more reddish egrets. This year, we didn't find as many reddish egrets. They were kind of few and far between. The other bird which is kind of cool is we have osprey here in Vermont. Right. But down in the Bahamas, they have their own kind of subspecies of osprey, so the Bahamian osprey. And so we found several of these, as well as Bahamian swallows and Bahamian orioles too, which are kind of endemic birds to those islands. So that was, those were always good to find, a little bit of land birding while we were there. When we weren't staring at the beaches and the shores. And you saw some other critters too. We did. One of the things that makes the Jolter's Keys important, as well as South Andros, is a fish, which uses these same flats. This is a bonefish. And there's an industry that's basically revolves around this fish, where people from all over North America and other locales come down to the Bahamas, come to these bone fishing clubs. They will rent out people like Bernd Ferguson, who was our boat driver, and they'll fish these flats when the water is high, and they'll go after these bonefish. It's a catch and release kind of system. So there's an entire, industry that revolves around that, and a kind of a coexistence of the shorebirds that are using these flats and the bonefish that are using these flats.
It's a good economic income.
It's a good economic income, and the international program with Audubon is also trying to make the the shorebirds and some of the other birds in the Bahamas an economic driving force too, to have people not only come down to go fishing for bonefish, but
to look for birds.
And other things. We came across a bunch of turtles. We had more turtles on the west side of Andros last year than we did this year, so I'm not exactly sure if it's just the substrate or that mud substrate that we had was, we saw more turtles, or because we didn't see plovers, we just were looking for more turtles. We came across them.
What were some of the other components of your trip?
Well, what's nice is when I first started working down in South Andros, it turns out there's a group of students from UVM, led by Walt Pullman, who goes down to the high school down on South Andros. So I've known Walt for a long time, and we were able to make the connection with that local high school teacher. So I was able to go down and in one afternoon talk about the work that Audubon was doing and do a presentation to the high school class there. The UVM students come down and they go down and they work with this high school and they do a number of place-based educational stuff. So it was nice to make that connection and be able to, do that educational outreach with the students to let them know that they have this important resource.
I was going to say, what were the students' reactions? I mean, this is probably flora and fauna that they're used to seeing and probably take for granted.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those things when you start to talk about it and they're like, oh, you mean those little birds that just run across on the ground, which is the way a lot of people look at some of these smaller shorebirds, particularly. So it was great. One of the things we did talk about, and one of the things that was happening on the northern portion of Andros this past year, was a lot of these birds are banded. And so Audubon was also part of a banding program on the north end of Andros. This is the first banded plover that was caught in 2015. And you can see it has a little pink flag on it.
Right.
And those flags you can read by looking at them from a distance with binoculars. They banded more than 20 birds, and already 6 of those birds have been seen back along the Atlantic coast. They've been seen in Virginia, South Carolina, North Carolina, New York. So we're already seeing, again, the importance of, the Bahamas, and Andros in particular, and the Jolter Keys, is to this Atlantic coastal population of piping plovers.
Right. We've got a few minutes left. Anything you want to talk about as far as our local birds are going? I mean, it's springtime, birds are coming back. Birds are coming back,
yes. And, it's been a long winter. But it's what's interesting is we get a couple of sunny days and already there's big flocks of robins. They hang around with us all winter. The juncos are pushing through. People that have fields out next to their live out in the country a little bit might be hearing that peent call and the display of the American woodcock as they display, and they're around this time of year. There's ruby-crowned kinglets. The big push hasn't quite got here as far as the warblers and some of the thrushes, but we've gotten the early birds. Phoebes are back. I don't know, have you had your
saw
Phoebes
one yesterday,
back? Okay. Yeah. And bluebirds are starting to think about setting up shop, so we've had reports of those. And it's just nice to walk outside and hear bird noise.
Right.
The winter can oftentimes be a quiet thing, so to begin hearing robins singing, even coming into the studio today, I heard a nice robin singing out, and so very pleasant to the ears, especially for somebody who spends a lot of time looking at them.
So let me ask you this, it was a long winter, there was a pretty good amount of snow. Any anecdotal information that might have hurt the bird population, or a population that might have been particularly affected?
No, not that I've heard. It sounds like, even like the ruby-throated hummingbirds are back on time. It seems early for them, but some of them have been recorded back in the southern part of the state. It may affect when robins move in. Snow cover often can, dictate when, how many robins might be around during the winter. We had some snowy owls that were reported, not as many as last year. So not that I've heard of. I think everybody's just been expectantly waiting for the cold to break, which I think it has, and now we can spend time out. I was wandering around Vergennes during my daughter's soccer practice, even seeing the song sparrows and the juncos and everything that's back.
Is there anything that we should be doing on our property to encourage birds to?
One thing,
nest?
a lot of people feed birds. You want to, not only is the winter going, but, bears are back around. So you may want to think, if you're in bear territory, to pull your feeders in. Clean your bluebird boxes. Make sure your bluebird boxes are clean, and make sure you get out there and remove last year's material. That's always a good thing. Put up new boxes if you have the opportunity. I had a caller call in the other day asking me about bluebird box placement and stuff like that. So just little housekeeping type things, just to make things ready for when they get back.
Got to get my bird water out too.
That's right. Birds need water. Ma Nature will take care of most things, but we can do some things to welcome the birds back.
Well, if you have a bird-related question, you can pass it along to Mark. You can write to him at the Audubon, Vermont, 255 Sherman Hollow Road in Huntington. The zip code is 05462. You can also email your questions to Mark. His email address is mlabarr@audubon.org. Send Mark your questions, and he'll try to find a time to answer them right here on Bird Notes. Thanks so much.
You're very welcome.
That's our program for today. I'm Judy Simpson. We'll see you again next time on Across the Fence.